Thank you, everyone, for being on the call. This is Sundi Aiyer with the Supply Chain Management Chapter of SCM, Singapore Computer Society. We are here today for our inaugural ASCENT Series 2020 launch. And the discussion topic today is supply chain disruptions and response strategies that companies can take to respond to the current pandemic that we are all facing. Very delighted to have a distinguished panel of industry practitioners from Asia Pacific with a strong European and North American interest as well, and also digital and technology. So I will get us started. We will do this as a panel discussion to get the views from these leaders that we have assembled. I've received questions from many of you that I will ask them, and then we will finish with parting thoughts on how we can get over this. So let me just take a couple of minutes quickly to talk about, for those who may not know, Singapore Computer Society's Supply Chain Chapter is the flagship chapter that looks at supply chain from a business process and technology enablement perspective. So we have members from logistics, from supply chain, manufacturing, digital, analytics, CIOs, so very broad range. And that is represented in the team that we have today, starting with all of them are very good friends I've worked with for a number of years. I'm very delighted that they are here to share their experiences with us. I'll do the introductions, but before I do the introductions, I want to start with just a very sincere thanks to the people who are around us in Singapore. We are very, very lucky, very fortunate to be in Singapore when we are going through this crisis. And really a deep appreciation to the frontline workers, the healthcare people, the logistics people, the drivers who are delivering critical food items, medicines, without which supply chain has no sense. We can talk about disruptions and response strategies like we will do today, but these are the people who are living it day to day on the front line. So I want to start our session with a deep appreciation to the logistics practitioners, to the industry people in healthcare, in logistics, who are really taking care of all of us. With that, let me start with my friend Jaya, who I've known for a number of years. He leads the logistics group at Schneider Electric as a vice president for the East Asia and Japan region. Previously, he was with HP, also doing the same things, very, very familiar. He is a lawyer in addition to being a logistician. And we're very happy to have Jaya. I've been in many sessions with Jaya. Very fortunate. He's battling right now real issues in the Malaysia-Singapore cross-border with stuff sitting in Malaysia, not coming to Singapore, and very appreciative that he took the time to be with us today. Following Jaya, we have Philippe, another good friend of mine, back to very, very old Accenture days, but more recently with companies like J&J, Mundi Pharma, and now with a candy company, PVM, we call it affectionately, Perfetti Van Melle, and again, a very strong logistician, supply chain planner. His responsibilities are very global. He will share with us what he is doing, not only from a supply chain operations standpoint, but also from a people leadership perspective, culture. How do you incentivize people to do the right thing in this time of chaos, in this time of uncertainty? Very happy to have Philippe with us. Following Philippe, we have another good friend of mine, Devraj Kumar, industry veteran from companies like DB Schenker, from Tetra Pak, the packaging company. More recently, he is with Zimmer Biomet. For those of you who may not be familiar with this name, very well known in the biomedical space for surgeries, for hip replacement. So God forbid if you have an elective surgery, you want Devraj supply chain team helping you with getting the right equipment to the doctors who will be serving you. So very happy to have Devraj with us. He was also previously with Nokia and Microsoft. So he brings a high-tech and consumer electronics background to the conversation today. And rounding up these three colleagues who are on the ground in the trenches is a good friend of mine, Manoj Saxena, who is on the digital and IT side. He is currently the chairman of RosettaNet, the digital standards company that many of you are familiar with. Previously, he was with Ingram Micro. He has also worked he was with HP before, done a lot of different things, and very happy to have Manoj with us also. And my role today is an easy one. I think many of you know me. I am a management consultant by training, have been in supply chain for a number of years, last 12 years here in Singapore, but looking after Asia broadly, and also have worked extensively in the US and Europe. I will ask some questions, some tough questions, and some provocative perspectives from our panelists. So that's the plan for the evening, the hour that we have. And Yavi, let's jump into it from here right away. So I will start with, so a number of us are in the call. Let me start with setting the stage and ask all the panelists, but perhaps Jaya, maybe Gabby, if you could mute Jaya, please. Maybe Jaya, you can help us get started with what are you seeing on the ground, some of the challenges that you are seeing for Schneider Electric, a very large, heavy manufacturing company. Your orders are many, many months out, so you can't really change things very, very quickly. But what are you seeing in the ground with the coronavirus, and how are you addressing that? Maybe you can get us started, and we can get views from our other colleagues.
Thanks, Sundar. First of all, thanks for having me here. I mean, it's a pleasure to see all of you guys. So let me just come to the question per se. I think this is the first time we have seen, for me at least personally, first time we've seen the whole value chain being disrupted, right? It's not centered. The global world has gone through many crises. We have seen crisis, currency, liquidity, we have seen flooding. We have seen crises before, but not to this scale, right? So for us, I think the whole value chain is fragmented in many ways. You can take a plan, source, make and deliver, the whole value chain. Every segment has some level of disruption. So right up to the factories getting commodity sourcing, you see a challenge. You see people, and then the most important is also there's a domino effect. It's not like it's centered in one coverage, one particular country, right? When you had the flooding, you centered in few countries, Thailand and so on. The coverage is like a domino effect, one geography after the other geography, you start to see something's happening. So to me, I find this like a trinity, a very unique trinity where you have a very constrained environment, you have a high operating cost, and your service level may even be below par. This three combination to me is very unique. You don't have this trinity before, a supply chain trinity of very uncomfortable trinity of three elements. Never before and one at this scale, right? And the value chain is all over the value chain. You see a disruption, not a particular area, right? So for us, we are challenging like any other company will probably face. We are managing it through a very structured way, which I'll go elaborate later on as we go through the talk. So that's my take in this whole thing. So there's no one particular area of the value chain that to me strikes out as the main one. It's across board.
Thank you, Jaya. Thank you for setting the stage. Maybe if I could go to Philippe from a very different industry. Philippe RUFFIER leads the Asia Pacific supply chain function for PVM, which is a candy manufacturer. Very discretionary product, but very important, one can say. I think like our friend Barbara was saying, this is a time for comforts also, creature comforts also. So I think candy is very important. But in all seriousness, Philippe, we were discussing, you have been in supply chain for many, many years now, and this is a very hard time. And you were telling me how now people have begun to realize the value of the supply chain function. Philippe, I was wondering whether you could perhaps elaborate on that from what you're seeing at Perfetti, please.
Yes, I can just talk a bit about that. So the initial question is what the impact on the supply chain. So we can talk a lot about this, but there are probably two impact things that will change in a longer term. The first one is, as you just mentioned, usually supply chain is a bit of the same as IT, you know, when everything is working well, nobody talk about supply chain. And when we have issues, suddenly supply chain becomes the center of interest and everybody is talking about supply chain because products are not coming. So it helps actually, one of the impact is that we have to communicate much more than what we usually do in order to let everybody knows what is coming, what are the contingencies, what are the risks. And by doing that, I realized that a lot of my stakeholders in the organization didn't know that actually I was the one controlling this aspect of the business or that aspect of the business, or the importation of raw material has such a big importance for the delivery of goods in a country, for example, and it has to be coordinated with logistics. So it helped me, or I have to explain a bit more what we are doing in supply chain and help people to understand what is actually supply chain doing in operations. Because most of organizations are focusing on marketing, they are maybe focusing on finance or research. On in FMCG, supply chain is taking a bit as a granted, and it helps actually to reposition the supply chain correctly. The second impact that I can see is definitely the need for speed and agility. We are still in my organization working on a monthly cycle. We should be on weekly, but we are still not at that level of sophistication. And now we don't have a choice. Monthly doesn't work at all. We need to be weekly. We need to be even daily because things are extremely dynamic and the decision we take today will be wrong tomorrow. So we need to revise constantly. We need to align everybody constantly on what we are doing. So the impact is how do we get agile and extremely dynamic in an environment where we are not prepared for that and we don't have the information on the spot that we need to take the right decision. So it helps us to bridge actually this link of missing communication that we didn't have to do before because we are comfortable in the organization we have. Now I need to know the stock at that location in that country and the impact on the raw material, and I need to know now. The decision is not tomorrow, it's now.
It's now.
I didn't have to do that before, I have to do it now. So it helps people to work together, to be much more reactive in order to reduce the risk and take the right decision immediately. So the cycle is just turning very, very, very quickly. And we will be sharper later on in order to take the right decision because we know where the information is sitting. Right.
Thank you, Philippe, for that. And then let me move to Devraj in a very different industry now. It's elective surgery, right? So from heavy manufacturing to interesting food for confectionery and candy, now to getting surgical equipment to a surgeon. Very, very different industry. Devraj, what are you seeing in Zimmer Biomet in terms of demand disruptions, supply disruptions? How is your company reacting to the pandemic, and thoughts that you can share with the rest of us, please?
Right. And thanks, Sundi, for setting the stage and to build up from what my friends were saying. One aspect which is very different from this crisis is that we had faced, like in 2008, financial crisis. But this time, perhaps for the first time, we are facing the very existence of human life in a question. And this throws a completely different dynamics into how we design our supply chain and how we react to it. So having said that, on the healthcare industry side, there are two dynamics which are in play. There are certain healthcare companies which are having a huge spurt in demand, the companies which are into manufacturing of ventilators and things which will help, patients to recover faster. But then the demand has really shot up, which is great. At the same point of time, there is supply constraint because of lockdowns or raw materials not happening at the right time. The freight is not available, the freight capacity. And the same story continues particularly then to our kind of companies, where elective surgery is a lot about well-being, and where patients have a possibility to postpone the surgeries which were planned a month later. And at the same point of time, especially it has happened in certain countries like China, where the doctor fraternity scarcity is so dominant that doctors have been moved to serve, I would say, patients who are more, I would say, priority at this moment than the surgeries, which can be more at I would say, bit of elective level.
Right.
So naturally, what has happened is that companies like ours had to kind of restructure the demand because the demand is weakening as we are moving forward. Elective surgeries are getting pushed when things recover. And whatever supplies are coming, the biggest impact what we are seeing is the inadequate air freight capacity. Where air freight has become premium because of lockdown, different, it's just not airports, but also like Singapore Airlines, if I remember, 97% of the aircrafts are grounded at this moment. And a dominant part of cargo actually goes into the passenger aircrafts in the belly space, as it is called. So these are the huge impact what we are seeing, not just from an industry perspective, but also companies like ours, which are in the elective surgery space.
Right. No, thank you, Devraj. Manoj, if I could come to you, you sit in a very interesting position as a CIO of Ingram Micro, right. But then as a very, I know we have discussed, you have been a business partner to the CIO. As a CIO, you have been the business partner from a technology viewpoint, and you have worked on the ground in the operations space. What are you seeing in the startups that you're advising? Is there concern? Are they thinking that I think I love it when you mentioned, Jaya, the trilogy, the three things that are happening, right? It's like thank you, Trinity, thank you.
Trinity, yeah.
It's like three black swan events almost, right? It's it's a pandemic. It is, if you want to call it the whole oil confusion that was happening. Confusion is a soft word, but the whole impact of the oil dispute on the supply chain, the whole cutting down of the logistics mode. So there are multiple black swans, probably more than three, right, that are happening at the same time. And I wonder, Manoj, from where you are sitting, when you're advising CIOs, how are you telling them what to be looking out for in this kind of situation?
Yeah. Thanks, Sundi. Thanks for having me. And as all my panelists have put it out in class and in Singapore, you must have seen that, right? So that allows you had one corner to save or one corner to hide. Right. It's like transparent and it's open, kind of, right? So it's a very tricky situation, I would say, today where we are. And typically, if you see, our panelists have spoken about supply chain. They've spoken about the need for the information. How do you react fast and all that stuff? The difficult part for a CIO in a board meeting is how do you get my CEO or my CFO to agree on investing in technology, right? So that's been the biggest challenge of the past and even the future. And moments like this, right? I mean, if you see that what's important is companies have invested on the technology and were able to ramp up the ecosystem fast, quick. I mean, we had Phil say that how fast we can react, how quickly we get data and all that stuff, right? Those are the companies who are able to lead or maybe sustain or maybe have a resilience response, I would say. For example, if you were to get a budget approved for a year on a DR or a BCP plan, people in the board, they consider it as an insurance in a traditional way, right? They would say, can we do it later? We have another NPI coming in. Can we go for a product line? So today, I mean, after this incident, I'm sure any of these BCPs and the DRs and the investments of technology and platforms, they would make it on the top of the table by default. So a CIO doesn't have to struggle and think that you have to do it. You'll have moments like this and all that stuff. So that's happening. If you see that in the e-commerce companies, we have social distancing happening as a norms given to us. And all the e-commerce companies are ramping up their resources. Even we are seeing that Amazon needs 100K and above employees. They're tripling the salaries. There's grievance of employees being used more in the logistics sector. Same with the food delivery kind of environment and all that. So there's a spike there, right? So the companies have invested in the platforms and the digital space. And the best part is being in cloud, right? I mean, you have things like Netflix, you have Amazon Prime and all being streamed when people are sitting home, and I ran out of movies, to be honest.
Yeah.
And what next to see, right? So in that sense.
So, or Zoom, like we are doing right now.
Zoom,
Right?
Absolutely. So that cloud technology helps you to ramp up and ramp down. So all these are a good showcase for a CIO to say that you need to invest, and if you're there, you can ramp up fast and you can come back to the business faster and quicker. So that will be a lot easier and well accepted, I would say.
Right. No, thank you. Thank you. Very good perspectives. Let's move to what companies are doing in the next, let's say, in the next few weeks and months, right? So this is a mid to perhaps long-term shock to the supply chains, right? This is not going to, as Jaya, Philippe, Devraj, and Manoj, all of us have talked about. This time it is a new situation. We have to get used to the new normal. Probably it will never get normalized, right? So I wonder, maybe Jaya, if you could start. Gabby, if you could unmute Jaya. Jaya. Thank you, Jaya. Maybe we were discussing. Jaya and I are also collaborating with some universities to see what can we learn from this and take it forward. We'll come to that in a minute. But maybe Jaya, right now, again, I know you're in between shifts. You're looking at the European shift already, which has started. But what are you doing at Schneider Electric? With the next few weeks. Once the blocks between Singapore to Malaysia to China gets removed, how does demand jump up? These are long-term orders to large customers. Supply chains cannot really adapt in a matter of weeks or months. How are you preparing? Perhaps if you could share, Jaya.
I think the first thing is I think any company needs to set up a very structured approach to manage this crisis, where you do not know when is the timeline, where's the end of the tunnel. The light end of the tunnel, you do not know. You do not know when you're going to expect which country is going to go to a blockade or lockdown or what have you.
Yeah.
A very important structure that can go for a couple of months. Be prepared for a long-term haul. And this structure must be an end-to-end structure. It's not just logistics, it's not just planning, it's a whole SCORE model, right? Factory all the way to the front office. So a very integrated task force that really can see end-to-end visibility. So that to me, that's a very fundamental thing, that if you don't get it right, you can't take more hits to the supply chain and your agility will be affected. So one of the most important things we are doing is having a very structured, cascaded, interlocked between the region, among the function, and interlocked very well with the global teams. That interlock is very important. Let me give you a simple example of rebalancing, for example, right? Rebalancing inventory across board is something that you can only do when you have it properly structured, with proper digitized tools and so on, and you know where the opportunities and how do you move inventory around. No point in a constrained environment like this is very important to be able to move inventory where necessary, right? I hear the bell coming up very soon, but the point is that to me that is one of the main important things. I have a very war room like is wartime. Have a very war room structure. Yeah. To be prepared for the long haul. That's one of the there are many things, but this is something that I think everyone should be looking at.
Great, thanks, Jaya. You make a very good point, Philippe. Maybe if I could go to you. We were chatting about that also in the candy industry at Perfetti. You cannot. The manufacturing needs that lead time and the commitment of the orders. So while SNOP is much more agile, which you shared earlier and Devraj shared earlier, you cannot really change the manufacturing line, right away. So Philippe, you were discussing thinking around the upcoming relief, and how could a company like PVM get ready for that? Perhaps you could share your views on that, please.
Yes. Actually, I think we are not that different from a lot of organizations where we find ourselves being in an extremely dynamic environment.
Yes.
And the fact that we cannot plan now these days because we don't know tomorrow is showing us to which extent we are in a very dynamic environment. Before we were hiding ourselves a bit behind the planning cycle,
right?
Where everybody knows that in this week they will do that, in this week they will do that, and therefore we organize ourselves in order to react to this planning. Now it's not possible anymore because we need to align. And what is coming to the surface is the rigidity we have on the back end, because we cannot change overnight the production the manufacturing system, because we are saying, guys, when you give the forecast, it takes me 6 months in order to make sure I have all the raw materials, for example. Right. I cannot shift like that. Right. Before it was possible because it was all process oriented and made in such a way that we can do. Now we cannot do anymore because the demand is far above the process that we have in place. So it shows the limit of the system we have when we are working in a very dynamic and extremely dynamic environment. We just cannot create miracle overnight. We don't have a magic stick.
Right.
This is becoming visible now much more than before.
Right.
So the learning is this one, is how can we adapt the need for flexibility of the planning to a situation which is extremely dynamic. And it's good in a sense, it's a very good learning because life is like this. And we will have to be more and more dynamic and more agile. And we realize that the structure and the rigidity we have is actually internal. It's all internal. All the roadblock, all the blocking points we have are blocking points that we give to ourselves because we want to structure. And we need to work on unlocking this because the market is not waiting for us. The market will be more and more dynamic. And this situation is showing us that the problem is inside. It's not outside.
Wow.
So we need to work on this agility internally.
Great. Thank you, Philippe. What a profound observation. The issue is not outside, it is inside. I love it. I mean, this is a supply chain forum, but it's a very philosophical mindset, isn't it, Philippe? We have to think about what we can do internally. And I think this can be applied to us in life, our lives also, right? Outside of what we do. Please, Philippe.
You know, when we talk about the lead time in supply chain, we talk about lead time. In reality, what we should be doing is to adjust the production based on the demand constantly.
Yes.
And if we don't do that, it's because we have stock in the middle, and we have stock because we have rigidity.
Yes.
So if we could remove all this rigidity, which is a theoretical exercise, we should be able to adjust every day the production based on the latest demand at the point of sales. A situation where we are now is showing us, pointing the finger to us, saying, guys, this is where your rigidity is. This is where you cannot move, and you should be able to move.
Right. No, very, very good, Philippe. Maybe Devraj, I'll ask you, and then I'll move on to another topic. We were discussing, you represent a different industry, certainly Zimmer Biomet, arguably different than Schneider Electric, where orders are already there. Yours is more discretionary, for people who want to do elective surgeries, right? But I wonder whether there are the discussions that are happening within your company, either at Zimmer or Tetra Pak. Let's take a Tetra Pak example or the Nokia example. Demand is not always going up straight to the top right-hand corner. It is always lumpy, right? As we all know. But of course, now, unfortunately, we are in a downward lump. So I wonder what kind, if we had an opportunity to come into your supply chain boardroom, in your planning room, what are the conversations, Devraj, that are happening, at Biomet Zimmer? Are you talking about what you can do, in simply completely different areas? While you're not helping necessarily a surgeon, can the technology, can the IP be potentially used for, something different? And I don't know, just an idea that was coming. I was thinking about what Dyson is doing. We talked about that. Yeah. Dyson, as we all know, they're a client I served. They are in the hair dryers and washing,
vacuum cleaners.
Vacuum cleaners, right? But the technology is being redirected to make ventilators. So what is the innovation, that one can drive from the issue that we're facing? Perhaps you can shed some light on that from your perspective.
Yeah, good point. I mean, across, this is, whether it's high tech, automobiles, healthcare, the channel is going to be full of inventory. So excess and obsolescence will be a key area which we'll all be sitting on at some point of time.
Yes.
And at the same point of time, one aspect which companies are looking into also is that many of the, particularly high tech actually, many of the necessities of life will be prioritized. Like
Yes.
a $1,000 phone may not be a priority for human existence for maybe even 1 year, actually.
Yes.
There'll be many other necessities which will come in place. So, so from a technology standpoint, one beautiful thing which I was experiencing very recently is the healthcare industry spends a lot of time on I mean, there's a very strong academy actually, which is there, educating the doctors, educating the frontline salesmen with manuals and healthcare topics and articles and better surgery, better patient treatment aspects. And when I was looking into that, what used to happen is predominantly these were designed for online training, but human beings were not so receptive to online. They wanted people to fly down to do these 2-day trainings and courses around the world. But what has happened is adversity is also helping us, that now people are saying that travel is not possible. Let me then adopt this online courses. So we want to kind of build up from where we are. I mean, make it as sticky as possible, that online training becomes one key aspect of enhancing the knowledge base of our frontline staff as well as the healthcare professionals, rather than actually going into physical meetings. So that's one aspect which is clearly coming out.
Great, thank you, Devraj. Let me change gears just a little bit and pull Manoj into the conversation from his digital vantage point. Manoj, as you look at the companies that you are advising and the large enterprises that you led previously as a CIO and the Chief Digital Officer, what are some of the learnings from a digital and technology perspective, that we can apply to our businesses? And I'm thinking very quickly as a thought provoker. You write a lot, and I know we have spoken together at conferences on machine learning and AI, and not to make everything relevant for everything, but it just occurs to me that this could be a very interesting time to help people build their capabilities through robotics, through AI for sort of capability building, right? When people are not available, either they're sick or because we are doing business continuity planning and they're not available, I wonder whether the new generation technologies would really force themselves upon us, right? In a very interesting kind of a way. I wonder, Manoj, what you are seeing and what your thoughts are from that perspective.
Absolutely. So that's we call it like a technology to the edge, right? Pushing it to the edge, automation and all that stuff. So the good examples which you just rightly brought in is Dyson was a good example, close to home, having HQ in Singapore and so on and so forth, right? So what made Dyson to move? One is the corporate social responsibility, trying to get a call from PM of UK to help, and within 10 days to come out, right? So what made the company change was a fellow panelist, Philippe, saying that there are certain constraints you could clearly see that this particular manufacturing system cannot change. We just heard the earlier panelists also, right? So what made this company move towards that direction? If you just take a closer look, Dyson always invested not only in the product, but also in the automation of their manufacturing lines, right?
Yes.
In terms of adopting Industry 4.2, robotics. If I'm not wrong, it's more than 90% fully automated plant in Tuas and in Singapore. You must have seen that, right? So that allows you to kind of be agile, not only in words or not only mindset change, which is important, but also to change your product lines on the fly to come to this space, right? Likewise, if you look at the good point you changed is the augmented reality, right? It's very important. You have people who are really, unfortunately or fortunately, quarantined, and they can't just read the place and all that stuff. How do you get a fresher or a junior person to start work and run the assembly line, for example? So the AIs and augmented reality, they're playing a huge role where organizations are taking that as a training tool to kind of cut down the years of experience. Like it's not just up here 20 years. If I'm not, the machine cannot run. You're just trying to squeeze it down, and anybody else can come in and then take over the role. So that's another thing which is happening, which I'm able to see. And the collaboration space, we spoke enough about with all the panelists, right? How do you make sure that you have a tower, you have a daily status, the focus is all over the place, there's no more traditional, it's what you call panic buying, or it's curiosity buying. Every day you need to kind of have a war room and then reassess your plan. How do you kind of cascade it to your suppliers? You need to have a robust supplier collaboration tool, or SRM kind of collaboration tool. Which kind of, remember the days where traditionally Dell was considered as the direct market company, those days, 15, 20 years back also. I still remember the white paper that they're able to have the communication to whole supply chain every 2 hours.
Yes.
That was a great part of that white paper, which is still calling back today. It's like you need to have this change cascaded to your suppliers. Like we had Devraj just spoke about inventory is going to ramp, which is true because you have cash flow as a KPI. Now that will ramp into just get the material in. I need the sanitizers. I need the raw materials. I need the capacity. So that the whole KPIs will swing upside down, and you need to inform your ecosystem, and they will have to have a customer collaboration tool, and you'll have to have a separate collaboration tool. Have your meetings and make sure they commit and you get real time data on how do you reposition your manufacturing, right? So companies who are invested on all that are able to change suite very fast. And that's what you're seeing with Medtronics, who's had their IP kind of made it open, right? You're seeing that with GM, and you're seeing that with Ford, all the announcements coming, right? So companies who are ready are able to make it fast. Rest are moving in the direction. And who are towards the Industry 4.0 technologies, fully automated, are able to change things fast. And this will be a big use case for them, live use case, although they didn't ask for it. It's not a happy thing, but they will come out very fast, and a lot more companies will follow the suit.
Thank you.
That's my take, yeah.
Thank you, Manoj. Thank you. I wonder, maybe Jaya, I'll pick your brain further on this. Jaya was, when we were preparing for the session, he said, we would like to really see how can we apply these things here in Singapore, in Malaysia, right? Where, as I mentioned earlier, Jaya is between shifts, between his Asia shift and Europe shift, as is Philippe, and I know Devraj. All of us are in multiple shifts. So I wonder, Jaya, when you are on the ground trying to get the product that is stuck at the customs, you hear about all these newfangled things. Are we? What can we really do, today and tomorrow, versus thinking a little bit more futuristically, right? This week when we work with SMU and NUS around the case study, I think it was really Jaya's idea. This is an amazing learning opportunity, right? That we can learn from and apply, but then also share for the future. So don't have an answer, but Jaya, maybe some top of the mind thoughts around what we should do and how can we help.
I think you may not be answering the question directly, but one of the things I think is very important to talk about is supply chain trust.
Yeah.
Supply chain trust at this time is one of the most crucial and determining factor. And look at demand. People, it's a pent-up demand. It's people are worried the stocks will come in, so they buy early. There's a lot of things, right? And it also can be a very financial risk because people cannot afford to pay now. So you must know who you're delivering in the first place. And I believe supply chain trust now comes to your partners. Those that have built strategic relationship with partners, I think I call it a judgment day to some extent. Because these are the places where they start to prioritize who are the ones they want to uplift. Could be a forwarder, could be your second tier, first tier. When they have limited resources because of blockades, and when they bring in people, who do you want to serve? So I think this is a very telling time where we normally take supply chain trust to be given. We don't talk about it much, but I think this is a telling time where you start to distinguish your strategic and your commodity players. And I see that very prevalent. And I talk about leadership not just in the immediate ecosystem, but the broader ecosystem, like working with governments. Today, the agility must be there to start to work with governments, to maneuver, to explain to them your issues. But if you're not structured that way, if you don't have the ability to work with your suppliers and work with the government, you haven't built trust over the years. Today, it is the time where you see that you're starting from scratch. So companies who can really move agile, fast, maneuver, navigate in this very uncertain VUCA kind of environment are people who have built supply chain trust in the environment. And that goes end to end, not just partners, right? It's also the sales, it's from demand and factory, everybody. So, and many blue collar workers, take Philippines for example, right? They know they cannot come to work. When they come to work now, their price is much more higher. Who do they go to? They can just job hop to another company. But where you have built and showed them that you care for them, your safety is the most important, they come back to you. So I see that in this crisis, a new phenomenon, a new topic of supply chain trust is more prevalent now that we don't normally talk about it. And it can manifest in many places. And I can talk the whole day about this, but I think that can be a very determining factor. And it's not something that you can start to sow the seed now. It's what seeds you sow in the yesteryears that pay off dividends today. That's one of the people I want to share with everybody.
Yeah, very fantastic point, Jaya. I think, thank you. Really thought-provoking point. We are in a, I think Philippe and I were talking about it. We are like firefighters, are we not? We're in a fire department trying to curb this fire, or we are pharmacology, or we are infectious disease experts trying to address the infection that we see in our doorsteps. But Jaya, you make a really good point. It is about the relationships that you built at HP that are following you at Schneider Electric, that you built at Dell, that Ann Clayton built at Dell that are following her to GM and then to Schneider Electric. Right? These are the CEO or supply chain leader at Schneider Electric. These are multiple years relationships that come to value, right? You cannot just say now there's a coronavirus new epidemic and you help with us, right? So really good point that you make. Philippe, I want to just if I could jump back to you. I think Philippe is on mute right now. Thank you. Thank you. You were sharing with me the Perfetti supply chain, and you're sharing with me you have about 57 suppliers from Europe that are coming to Asia. And this is, of course, the bill of materials for the Perfetti product is a bit simpler than Schneider Electric's, but nevertheless, this is a very important part. It's a food item, right? So quality is very important. Customer aspirational value is very important. And anything can happen. Any contamination could be very detrimental. Nestle, a competitor to BVM, a very large food products company, I had an opportunity to work with them. They were really investing into things like blockchain for product tracing, for quality, and then for trading partner collaboration, Jaya, as you were talking about. And a lot of that, there was technology involved, but a lot of it was working with governments, working with senior people on both sides of the organization to gain trust, right? And Philippe, I don't know, you have done this a lot with starting from Michelin, a tire company, to J&J, to Mundi Pharma, a large pharmaceutical company, to a regional player, to now a food products company. How do companies build trust? Now it is too late. If you go, it's like saying, you be my friend, when there's no money there, or when you really need help. That's not the right time. So I wonder, Philippe, from so many different companies that you have worked on, what have you seen, right? And no right or wrong answer, but perhaps your experiences would be very valuable.
Yeah, it's a very broad question, actually. Building trust, I would say it's important with government officials, specifically in pharmaceutical environment.
Yep.
Because we collaborate constantly with the authorities in order to set up the rules.
Yes.
Of which product we put on the market, which product we don't put on the market.
Yes.
Because it's extremely regulated environment in pharmaceutical, and therefore the relationship is important and it's built over the time.
Yes.
Because we need them, but they need us as well, because we are experts in our specific area of development, probably more than what they are, and therefore there is a very close relationship which is usually happening in a pharmaceutical environment. In confectionery, it's a different environment because it's F&B. So the regulation is not that tight. And there is always this possibility of interpretation of what is possible, what is not possible, which is more open than in pharmaceutical. Pharmaceutical is black or white. And we participate to make it black or white. Food industry is a bit more relaxed. So therefore the trust is not too much with authorities, it's very much with our colleagues, partners, suppliers, distributor we are working with. And one key element which is extremely visible now is everybody is rushing for capacity, everybody is rushing for specific raw materials. And the supplier will give to the colleague or his client that
the partner.
He have a partner, he has a good relationship with him.
Right.
And it's important now that when we ask for a specific favor, make sure that when he has a limited capacity, give it to us. It's important to keep in touch with him. Not only we receive the product, but we call him later saying, thank you, this was great. 2 weeks after, how is it going for you? Are you in trouble? Is everything okay? How is your staff going? Is everybody back in the office? Do you have issues? Do you want some support for your credit term, for example? Or financially, if we have a bit of buffer, you want our help as well to make sure that you will go smoothly through these difficulties, because in the end of the day, we are partner.
Right.
And sending back the lift of something that you request initially is extremely important, because this is where we have the opportunity to build the trust with our supplier, with our colleague, with our partners, saying, guys, we are not only here to do business, but we are here actually to have a good and better life together. And the experience we are facing these days is phenomenal in order to communicate this partnership with our key suppliers and make sure we are not only just a client, but we are much more than that.
Yeah.
One point which I would, if I can add, actually, you know, like when we do business, it's about what and how. The what is all those contracts and KPIs and the commercial negotiation. How is all about the feeling, you know, like how did we help you be more successful in this partnership? And this is the time when the how, the years of investment on the how will stand us on a strong wicket. That is driving the what. And I see that also amongst the colleagues, actually, you know, like we suddenly realize, irrespective of job titles and roles and background and cultures and all, the writing on the wall is quite similar. It's human existence, you know. So it's a natural collaboration which is coming in place of driving the how and the what, you know.
Great. No, thank you, Devraj. Philippe, quickly, I was reminded of one conversation that we had where you said that internally also, you know, it is the role of the supply chain has become quite a bit more important, isn't it? Of course, with the outside partners, but also with our own employees, with our sales team, you know, with our HR team. It's just bringing, in a very ironic way, it's bringing us together, isn't it? And if there's a learning, I think there is that learning also. In addition to, I know my question earlier was partnership with suppliers and key ecosystem players, but then partnership inside also. Wonder, Philippe, you had something to add, please.
Absolutely. And the main driver for this one is because we don't have a time. We are all extremely busy in this period.
Yes.
And when we bring people on a board for a meeting, for a discussion, we want to have the right people. They need to bring something to the team, to the discussion. And the other one, just don't bother them because they're already busy on something else. So this helps to sharpen our knife and to have the right discussion with the right person at the right time. So initially, in the beginning of this crisis, we had a lot of meetings. Now we try to reduce, but to be straight to the point and to ask the right question to the right person straight from the beginning. This helps to redefine a bit the role and the récit of everyone. And we work much better together now because we are much quicker. The decision we are taking now, sometimes we are very quick because we have the right person around the table and they are prepared. They come prepared. It goes quickly in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour. It's gone. We go to the next point because we are working under the pressure. Before it was a bit more relaxed, so therefore the relationship was probably a bit more fuzzy, not very clear, and people didn't participate to some meetings very much actively. Now it is over. We don't have this theory anymore.
Right. Thank you, Philippe. I think let me go to the chat group. Gabby, are there questions on the chat group that we need to look at? Are there questions in the chat team, or I'll keep going? Let me just see.
Okay, I guess we can let all the participants know that they can post their questions on the chat. If there's any questions that you have, you can actually type in the chat because everyone is on mute. So if
Thank you. Thank you, Gabby. Thank you. Yeah, please, if you, we are really enjoying this conversation, and I'm asking all the questions, but I'm sure you have questions also. So please enter in chat box, and we will take those. Let me continue this discussion. I think we started the conversation by saying that really this is a new normal. You know, this is very unusual, very unprecedented, and really I think between all of us, you know, we have. You know, I don't know, 200 years worth of experience probably in the space. You know, we have never seen anything like this before. But having said that, you know, just 10 years ago, we had the earthquakes in Japan. We had the floods in Thailand. Even more recently, just a few months ago, we had the big showdown between the US and China on the trade tariffs. You know, which actually we spoke about in one of our SCS ASCENT series. Then there was the Japan-Korea trade tariffs issues. So there were shocks to the supply chain that we are familiar with before. If you go a little bit further to the financial crisis, you know, again, there was a big shock to the supply chain system. So I wonder, in a broad way, while this is very new and unprecedented, are there learnings from for example, the Japan experience that we can adapt? Are there learnings from the financial crisis, right? On people's thinking, on psychology, you know, that we can learn from. So kind of a broad question. Maybe Manoj, I'll go with you. I know you were with the semiconductor company in Japan actually when the earthquake was happening. And you're driving some of those conversations. Perhaps you could share your views, experiences from that time.
Absolutely. So we were in the semiconductor industry with one of the major chip makers in Singapore. Yeah, you're right, absolutely. So that's where the Japan crisis came in. And most of us used to think that the world's manufacturing hub is either Taiwan or China. And only then, after this crisis, people begin to know that high precision items, more than 95% of it still comes from either Japan or Germany. The whole world was kind of moved towards that, right? The situation was close to what all the panelists were discussing today, and we were thinking like there's no raw material, probably there will be a holiday for the plant, and we're going to enjoy. So it didn't happen actually, right? So it was a war room, and we had to. So we were lucky that when I moved to that semiconductor industry, I was able to build a supply collaboration piece. That trust and all other things were maintained with the vendor management team, but at least the technology side, I could help the business team in having that. Supply collaboration piece. It was in place, so that played a major part, right? So that's why we could get the capacities and the inventories all discussed, and we could probably make that shift and change on the fly, probably on a daily basis. So that's something which I can recall, that we had to buy the capacity, we had to forget about cash flows and make the inventories come in, right? So those were the things which kind of recalls. But tying it to the context of today, I think. There at least there was a fallback plan of where you do the alternate sourcing or maybe how you come about in different places. But now it's like everybody's kind of in a same sweet spot. I think you should take a step back and look at the heat map which is done for where the coronavirus spots are. Right, we have everybody's looking in the news that there are sprouts here, there are sprouts there, but nobody's looking into a supply chain of how South Korea is coming back, how China is coming back. The PMI index has come back to 52 this morning, right, which is very good in February. How do you revamp or re-engineer your supply chain to this heat map to say that how do I ramp my capacity as the countries begin to unveil themselves? So that's something which is different from the context of Japan crisis versus this, because it's a 360 degrees. You have to just follow the recovery path of the countries and readjust your supply chain strategies, and should have your tools and the collaborative tools in place. I can't emphasize enough. That's the only way it will allow you to move fast. So you can slightly look at it a different way. Yeah.
Great, thank you. That is a fantastic point, Manoj. And I think in this information overload on coronavirus, all of us get 100 WhatsApp messages every day, right? But then, as supply chain practitioners, there's very little, even in Wall Street Journal, even in business publications, there is very little on what is the impact on, what is the recovery potential, right? Of supply chain from this. and then recovery will happen. It is not that we are always going to be doomed for this. And how do we get ready for it? Philippe and I were discussing, how, without going into very specific PVM internal discussion, but how a company like a PVM is getting ready for the uplift that is the upswing that is going to happen, right? So how do you do smart promotions? You don't want to be sort of bad about it, but when the demand happens, how do you meet it, right? Or in the case of Jaya, when the demand happens for the heavy industrial products, in China, already the markets are recovering. How do we position us for that versus playing catch up, right? So I think those are the things that we should be keeping in mind as learnings, from recent history, right? Then I have a question. Maybe Philippe, we can talk about it. One of my clients was J&J, and Philippe was there working with them also during the floods in Thailand, right? And at that time, I think, Philippe, you were responsible for the procurement function, which is, again, very relevant to building trust with the suppliers, not just on the planning and the customer side, but, building trust with the suppliers. Philippe, I think you were discussing with me the Tylenol example of where you had to get Tylenol from, I believe, Korea, into the Thailand market, which is very unheard of, right? From a very high cost market into Thailand because everything was flooded, right? I had the opportunity, I think, Philippe, it was after you, but I had some automotive clients I was serving in Thailand, right? And where they were getting products from high cost countries because that was the only option, before everything was flooded, right? So there are some learnings, but I'll have Philippe comment on it, because we are in a very unique situation where it is really spread everywhere. So we have to probably think about pockets of learning, and then, how do we prepare for when the recovery happens? Philippe, I wonder if you would like to add something on that.
Yes, what we try to do, yes, actually, is to better prepare a backup that we usually don't do because we don't have the time. And we realize how fragile our supply chain is. New regulation, and this is actually significant. New regulation occurs very frequently without notice, specifically in developing countries, and we need to be prepared for that because there is no warning before.
Right.
Even now these days, for example, we do have government to just put a new regulation in place and saying, okay, on my product, for example, you need to put the local language, and they come overnight with this. We need to be prepared in period of crisis. We do understand that we have actually much more options than what we think. We have alternative supplier. We have possibility of different kind of registration to get product in. We have possibility to have some exceptions that we didn't think of before when we have an issue. And in the end, we have a lot of flexibilities that we do not explore when we are not forced to explore. And this is a good learning because it helps us later to adapt and to be flexible. To come back to my previous point, because we explore area that we didn't explore before because we just didn't think of it or we didn't have to. So regulation is one of them. Alternative supplier is another one. Even having the same product produced in different factories usually is difficult. In the end of the day, it's not that difficult because currently we are doing it at flash speed. I can tell you. Our products are going to be produced everywhere. 6 months ago, my R&D department was saying, even don't think of it, it's not possible, it will take 1 year to do. Now they do it in a week. And therefore they are extremely flexible. So it's a good learning as well to push people to the latest possibility because it gives us an opening to a lot of things that actually are possible and we didn't think it was possible before.
Great, thank you. Philippe, thank you very much. I think I will, we are getting to the end of our time together. This was just a fantastic conversation. Number of questions have been coming up on technology. I think some of our panelists addressed that earlier. I know Manoj talked about supply chain control tower, use of AI, machine learning. I know Philippe talked about SNOP not being a cycle anymore. It is really continuous planning, and you absolutely need technology. But again, technology is not the solution to it. Jaya talked about it also. There was a question from Barb around a broader level question around how do we help people, get acclimatized to this new normal. So a lot of questions. We will. I'll take the lead later on to work with the panelists to try and come up with some answers because of the interest of time. This could have been a 4-hour panel discussion with the 4 amazing panelists that we have. So unfortunately, we do not have that. So I want to take this opportunity again. I think to end on a very positive note, Philippe, like you just did, where you said that while there are a lot of negatives, while there are a lot of challenges, I think this is helping us become more agile. It is helping us. This catastrophe is helping us, begin to work closely with our tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, but also internally with our colleagues. As Jaya mentioned, it is about trust. It is really about making the best of what we have available. At a personal level, at a business level. I started this with a word of thanks to our adopted country, or at least my adopted country of Singapore. But all of us represent so many different countries and so many parts of the world. Collaboration, not just between supply chain partners, but people, geographies, nations. So I'm very, very optimistic. I'm just generally an optimistic person, but I think I'm very optimistic that we will come out of it better than we were. It is going to be a new normal. I think we are very well positioned to take advantage of that new normal. So with that, I want to really extend a very, very big thank you from Singapore Computer Society. Thank you, Barb, for the silent clapping. To Supply Chain Chapter, to my colleague Gabby, who really ran all of this thing and helping us manage time. A number of our EXCO members are also online. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to get them to ask questions, but the questions were flashing. A big thank you to all of them. And again, this is just the first of the continuing conversation. We will absolutely have all of you back to visit with us. Hopefully when this pandemic is over, to talk about what you are doing and how we can work together. So on that note, a big thank you. Stay well, stay strong, stay healthy, and go supply chain, go Singapore.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
And we will come back with the questions. And I think Gabby, back to you, please, for our AGM meeting, please. Thank you.